My wife and I recently moved, and we were in the backyard, and we were looking and came up with the idea how nice it would be to have a 6-foot high privacy picket fence in the backyard to allow our German Shepherd to run freely in the backyard. And I was walking along the back property line and noticed that there is a problem. Directly in the path of this proposed fence was a tree, and it seems that tree had been there a while. I would guess about 50 years. I thought, well, that's a little bit of a problem. So that night before I went to bed, I thought to myself, I wish that tree weren't there. I wish somehow it would just go away. Well, you know, I woke up the next morning, got myself a cup of coffee, and walked back there, and that tree was still there. And that day, the more I reflected on it, the more angry I became. And I said, God, this is all Adam and Eve's fault. I didn't put that tree there. And I am certain that in the Garden of Eden, this kind of problem never existed. And I should not be suffering the consequences of the transgression of Adam and Eve. Well, I walked out the next morning with my cup of coffee, and to my amazement, the tree was still there. It occurred to me that if that tree's going to move or be removed, I would be the one that would remove it. Well, I got my chainsaw out and I cut through that tree, and I assure you that once that saw had cut through the trunk of that tree, it fell to the ground with a thud. And I thought, see? And then I realized that while I had made the tree invisible from the road, when you get closer, the stump was still there in the path of this beautiful fence that's going to be there someday. So, I knew the stump would grow back if I didn't remove it. I got some tools. I got this long 17-pound rod that's got a sharpened chisel end that can cut roots, and I began to plan that I would circumscribe a trench around the base of that stump and cut the main roots. I did. It was hard work. I would thrust that spear into the ground with all of my might, and I would work at it and work at it, hour after hour. And I soon began to realize that what this was gaining me was, well, fatigue, and there's still a blister on my hand. And in spite of circumscribing a trench around that tree, the stump did not move. I was only scratching the surface of the problem. You see, the roots of that tree grew deep and grew wide. So I got a shovel and I began to dig a trench around the tree. In fact, a crater, not only around the tree, but under the root ball of the tree. And it took hours, it took days. And as I was doing it, I began to become discouraged, because sometimes you'd get a shovel full of dirt and you would raise that shovel, and on the way up, the shovel would brush up against a root that was sticking out, and all the dirt would fall out of the shovel. And it's frustrating. And it's funny, about that time, you know, a neighbor would be driving by and they would literally stop their car and walk over to this place I was working and look down, and well, they thought I was crazy, I guess, but they would nonetheless be nice and they would compliment me on my hard work. But they were sincere in their appreciation of the beautification that the entire neighborhood would enjoy as the result of my work. I dug and I dug patiently, and finally the moment came when there was but a single root holding that entire stump was hovered over the crater that had been dug. I raised that steel bar with a sharpened edge, and I thrust it into the ground with all the strength I could muster, and I heard a loud snap as that root broke, and that stump fell into the crater below the surface of the ground. What a victorious moment that was. But that victory, too, was short-lived because I realized that what remained was not only a crater, but a mountain of dirt that I had excavated from under that tree. The earth was scarred. I began the long process, shovelful by shovelful, of placing that dirt back in the crater that I had worked so hard to create. And finally, the day came when the ground was level, the stump was no longer there. What a victorious moment it was. But it was short-lived because I realized that it would take time for the grass to grow like a carpet over that bare earth that was now there. But I can think about walking barefoot on that lush carpet of grass in the near future. Well, perhaps you do not have a vision to build a fence in your backyard. And if you do, perhaps you do not have a tree and its stump standing in the way. But that stump represents a stronghold in our life. It did not appear overnight. It took time to get there, and it is the roots of that stronghold run deep and they run wide. Perhaps that stronghold is a financial problem. Perhaps that stronghold is a problem in a relationship. Perhaps that stronghold is a chemical dependency. And it seems like it is impossible. And you know, we can work hard at it in our own strength, but what we will meet is fatigue and most likely failure. We're probably going to need some help. We're probably going to need some tools. But with the help and with the tools and with the encouragement of others and the strength that we draw from that, if we continue and be patient and work hard, chip by chip, stroke by stroke, shovelful by shovelful, the stronghold can be removed and it'll be like it was never there. And then the gradual healing process can begin. You know, God promises us ultimate victory through Jesus Christ, but many of us think of it as pie in the sky. How do we survive between now and then? And God addresses those thoughts in His Word, and I'm reminded of the promise that God makes that He will give us strength until that ultimate victory. And that promise is found in Philippians 4:13. I'll share it with you now.